Greetings, ladies and gentlefish, and today I'm going to bring you a review of this thing, the Tier 6 Japanese medium tank, the Type 4 Cheeto. If I'm going to be honest, I'm actually going to bring you kind of a review of this plus the Tier 5 because they're very similar. So, in broad terms, what do you need to know about each of these tanks? Well, they are... I've sold my Tier 5, I'm afraid. You can go back to it. They are quite slow medium tanks that are comparatively large targets with poor armour, a decent gun and good gun depression. So having a look at this in slightly more detail, this is fully upgraded. You can see it's got 820 hit points. That sounds like quite a lot, and that's because it is. Let's have a look at some Tier 6 heavy tanks, for instance. The VK has 950, but the VK I think has the second highest hit points of any Tier 6 non-premium heavy tanks. Okay. About the KV-1S has 810, KV-2 860. So the Cheeto actually has the same amount of health as the ARL-44, as it turns out, and more health than the KV-1S. So it's got the same amount of health as a Tier 8 heavy, sorry, Tier 6 heavy. Tier 8 heavy? That'd be insane. Tier 6 heavy. It weighs 33 tons and has an engine power of 400 horsepower. What does that mean? It means it has a specific power of 12.23 horsepower per ton. If I put the stock engine back in, which I'm not actually going to, that will drop by 25%. So with the stock engine, that goes down to about 8 horsepower per ton. Fully upgraded, it's only 12. That's bad. So this is a sluggish machine. It has a speed limit of 45 kph, and it will reach that, but you'll need to give it a little bit of time to work its way up to it, but it will go that. Sometimes people have confusion about where the speed limit comes from. You have a puny engine, but it has a good speed limit. The speed limit doesn't depend upon the engine per se, it's dependent upon what suspension you have. That's the killer. Anyway, traverse speed 30, meh, nothing to write home about. Armour 75, 35, 35 on the hull, 75, 50, 50 on the turret. Essentially it doesn't have any, with an exception I'll get to in a sec. Standard shell damage and penetration, I'm going to get to that when I talk about the gun. Turret traverse speed isn't dreadful, 360 meters view range is okay, but nothing outstanding. Does however have a Tier 10 radio, so good signal range. So you have a sluggish machine with no armour. I mean seriously, 75mm, that's nothing. If you look at the Tier 5, the Chinu, that has 50 at most on it. And really, that's at most. I mean, there isn't really much of a gun mantle on this thing. The Tier 5 has no armour at all. The Tier 6 is a fractionally better story. Vast majority of the armour is garbage, and I'm not going to show you the actual armour scheme of this because it's a waste of everybody's time. The actual armour of this is garbage. That 75 applies here and here. The only place you're ever going to bounce anything from this, excluding miracle bounces, the only place you're ever going to bounce anything is from the gun mantle and the region surrounding the gun. Depending on which bit of that they hit, that can be up to an effective thickness of about 230mm. Straight on. I have taken KV-1S, 122mm Russian shells to that area of the tank and just eaten them, and it's loved. But that is the only place where you have any sort of armour, and that's kind of going to give you an idea as to how to play this. Okay, so there's no armour, and it's not very mobile. Fine. What about the gun? Well, this thing has two guns. So the Type 5 75mm gun, Tier 5 gun, it's the stock gun on this, and it's the top gun from the Type 5 Chinu, and it's the only gun that makes that Tier 5 tank worth playing. 12.77 rate of fire on it, 124 pen, 125 damage, good aim time, okay accuracy. This is not a terrible stock gun on the Cheeto, and it's quite a good gun for the Chi-Nu. If you compare it to the other Tier 5 75mm guns, it's easily the best of them in my opinion. So this isn't a bad weapon, but you know you can get better. So the moneymaker on this tank is this 7.5cm tank gun, Type 5, Model 1. To get an idea of what this is like, I'm going to compare it to the other Tier 6 75mm guns. So you've got the M1A2. There's two Tier 6 guns for the Americans, but I'm going to show this one. You have the M1A2. You have the you have this thing, the L70 for the Germans, and you have got, there might be a couple of others, but these are the ones I'm going to compare it to, because I think this will give you a good idea of what's going on. You've got the British Vickers HV gun. So, what have we got? Okay, well this is a collection of 75 and 76mm guns, fine. If we look at the rate of fire, the American over here has the best rate of fire by far. But, you know, the Japanese gun isn't bad, 15.79 rounds per minute. It's about the same, fractionally faster, but about the same as the British Vickers HV gun. Okay, so that's not bad. Penetration is where the Japanese tank wins, but only just. It's got 5 more millimeters of penetration than the German, and it's got, and it's got 10 more millimeters of penetration than the British machine. Okay, so penetration is good, fair enough. Average damage, it's higher than the Americans, but worse than the rest. Alright, it's a 75mm gun, you know, take what you can. Accuracy, it's tied with the British gun, pretty good, not quite as good as the German, better than the American. Aim time, it's got them all beat. So, I'm going to get rid of the American gun for now, because that functions slightly differently. That's kind of for just flanking people and pumping shots into them at a high rate of fire without necessarily aiming a great deal of much. Get rid of that. So which gun out of these does it compare with the most? Well, I would argue probably the British gun, the 75mm Vickers, high velocity. But, and this is the point, it's not actually that much different to any of them. All these guns are about the same. The British and the Japanese have slightly higher rates of fire than the German. The Japanese has slightly higher penetrations than the other two. It has the lowest damage by 5. It's got about the same accuracy and it's got a slightly better aiming time, but they're all about the same. So the gun on the Cheeto is approximately equivalent to the gun on the Cromwell and the gun on things like the prototype Panther, whatever it's called, the VK3002M, and so on and so forth. So let's just go back to the right machine. So the gun itself is kind of pretty standard for Tier 6 mediums. So, you know, decent, but nothing to really write home about. Nothing outstanding. So, the mobility's bad, the armour's bad, the gun is alright, but nothing spectacular. The other thing to bear in mind, of course, actually, I should mention with this gun, its premium ammunition is not APCR. It's another form of armour piercing. Long story short, whilst the penetration is higher than its regular AP rounds, they're not as high as on some other guns, so it's not as if you can just switch to APCR and blitz through a lot of targets. You know, it's better and it's useful, but not that useful, and it's quite expensive. And the high explosive ammo isn't all that good. So what does this tank have going for it? Well, three things really. One, it has a pretty damn good signal range, 750 meters, which is better than the Americans, better than the British. I don't really have any other tier 6 mediums, I don't think. No. It's better than the Americans and the British, which are the other two I've got. But, alright, that's nice to have, but it's not really going to rock anyone's world. View range, 360. The Americans get 370, and the Brits get 360. So pretty standard, and actually worse than the Yanks. The one thing this thing has going for it is gun depression. With the top turret, it has 10 degrees of gun depression, and so does the tank before it. Well, so do the Americans. They also have very good gun depression. Okay, fine. So, overall, what you're getting with this is a... Alright, what is it? It's a medium to long range support tank that wants to be using that gun depression to expose as little of itself as possible while still getting shots in on your opponents. The thing that makes it special is the combination of a gun that's approximately equivalent to the 75mm guns that the Germans and the British get, which are, let's not beat about the bush, they're better, or they're at least more flexible than the gun the Americans get. So you get arguably a better gun, or at least a more flexible gun, with the American gun depression. That's what you're getting with the Cheeto. What you sacrifice compared to, say, for example, an Easy 8, you sacrifice speed, mobility, and even compared to an Easy 8, frankly, you sacrifice armour. The turret on the American mediums can be quite bouncy, more so than the turret on this thing. Whilst this central section will bounce shots, none of the rest will. So, on paper, well, it's a specialised tank. If someone gets up close and personal to you, you're in a lot of trouble. You have to use that 820 hit points to soak some shots. And you have to be very careful. I mean, this thing gets one-shotted by KV2s with ease, which I've discovered the hard way. Okay, so what sort of crew skills and equipment do you want? Well, if you plan on keeping this machine, I would recommend 6th Sense on the commander. On everyone else, repairs isn't a bad idea, camo isn't a bad idea. Some of the snapshot isn't a bad idea, for instance, things like that. And you'll want safe storage on the loader eventually, I imagine. One thing that is worth pointing out, the engine in the front here gets knocked out all the time. So preventative maintenance on the driver wouldn't be a terrible idea, just to try and not get engine fires. And your repair kit is probably going to be used on the engine quite a lot. Because whilst you want to keep this thing hull down, there will be times when someone has a shot at your front lower plate. And if they aim there, they're going to penetrate it and they're going to make a mess of your engine. That's just the way it works. So, there isn't really a great deal that makes this tank shine. It's an okay tier 6 medium, but it's not great. It's reasonably good at what it does, i.e. going hull down or poking its turret up from ridges and taking shots with its reasonably good gun. It's quite good at what it does, but it doesn't do a great deal doesn't do a great deal else. And the thing is, apart from the gun depression, something like the Cromwell, that can, perform medium to long range work if you want it to, dependent on the situation, to about the same degree of success as the Cheeto. You pay quite a lot for this good gun depression. And I don't think, for most people, I don't think this tank is going to be a keeper. But, that's just my opinion. So let's have a quick look at the grind that you have ahead of you. And the grind really starts at tier 5 on the Chinu. In fact, let's just go look at the Japanese tech tree in general. So, you start off with the tier 1, fantastic. You can either go down these 3 light tanks or these 3 medium tanks. Now, a lot of people, or some people that I've spoken to, seem to think the light tanks are the better way to go, and that's actually the way I went to get to it. Because you get similar guns on a slightly more mobile, smaller vehicle that keeps its camo value when moving, which sounds great, but when you get to the tier 5 Chinu, you have to pay more experience to unlock it if you're going from the tier 4 light tank than if you're coming from the tier 4 medium tank. So I leave that up to you. When you get to the Chinu, you will have probably, well, it's difficult to judge because I had none of this unlocked, but then I was trying to grind through them as quickly as possible. The stock gun, this 57mm gun, it's not a bad gun, but it has absolutely no place on a tier 5 medium, especially a tier 5 medium that is not fast enough to really do much in the way of flanking. It's just unpleasant. The problem is, there's the next gun. Okay, it's a 75mm gun, that sounds encouraging, right? Well, your rate of fire takes a massive hit. Your penetration is even lower, 70 compared to 87. Your premium penetration is down as well, 100 compared to 131. Your average damage per shot is more, it's less accurate. In my opinion, it's a worse gun. You will then have to unlock the turret, then you get this gun. Rate of fire is about the same as the previous 75mm. Penetration, it goes up. Huzzah! So it's slightly better than the 57mm. Premium penetration, 112. It's basically a waste of time. You get 131 with the 57mm. Damage per shot higher. Accuracy about the same as the 57mm. So this completely overshadows this 75mm gun. So in my opinion, you unlock this gun just to progress. You don't want this first 75mm gun at all. You might want to use this 75mm gun, depending on your preference. You might not. It's up to you. If you think you're going to be firing any APCR, any premium armor piercing from this tank, and with either of these guns you're probably going to have to from time to time, you'll want to use the 57mm. And then you get to the top gun, which is just better than these two. So, it's up to you what gun you want to use up to this top 75mm, and then you want to use that. You have to grind through the turret to get there. The engine, if you want, you can skip the engine. It turns a lousy power to weight ratio into a bad power to weight ratio, and it's the stock engine on the Cheeto, so you're going to unlock it anyway. Suspension, I think you need. The radios, I would advise grinding them at tier 5, otherwise you're just going to be grinding them at tier 6. You might as well grind them a tier lower. But this is not a terrible grind, although the guns are pretty painful, but it doesn't take a huge amount of XP to get through them. Then you get to the Cheeto. So, how would I do it? In my opinion, your first port of call, so when you get this, you will have, if you've unlocked everything on the Chinu, you will have these 3 radios unlocked, and everything else will be stock. So, you can do this pretty much however you want. I'd leave the radios till last, because who cares. The suspension, you don't need immediately, so I wouldn't bother. So, the turret, it gives you more health and better gun depression, basically. It's nice to have. And the stock gun, it's the top gun from the previous tank, isn't terrible, but it does start looking rather ropey when you get into tier 8 games. So what I would advise, step 1, get the engine. It's just under 5,500 experience to unlock, just to try and get that power to weight ratio up. Step 2, I would get the gun. It's a notable improvement over its predecessor. I mean, seriously, if you compare these two, they're identical except that the second gun gets a better rate of fire, better penetration and better damage, and they're identical in every other respect. So your DPM goes up, your alpha damage goes up, not by much, your penetration goes up. Much better machine, a much better weapon. So yeah, I would get the engine first, then the gun, then the suspension, which you will need to mount the top turret, and then I would unlock this radio because you're going to use it later anyway, and then I'd unlock the Chewy tier 7. So that's what I would do, and the grind isn't too bad, to be honest. I can't see many people keeping hold of this tank indefinitely. Once I've done this review, I'm selling it and moving the crew to the tier 7. But some people might get on with it, although in my opinion, if you do like this, there are probably other tanks that would be far better for you. But anyway, I've blathered on way too much. So I say it's time that we had some games. Here is replay number 1, and you can immediately see that this is a decidedly hostile environment. We're in a tier 8 game, and we are here on Sand River. This game is going to show you what the Cheeto can do if just left to basically its own devices. And although this is a tier 8 game, you can still do quite a lot. So firstly, you can immediately see this thing it takes a little bit of getting going, but you know, when it gets going, we're trundling along here at okay, when it gets going you end up trundling along at 40-45 kph depending on terrain, but any sort of undulations or hills or difficult terrain or anything and you dramatically slow down. And we're typically doing around 35 here on average, I would imagine. 30-35. So we're going to come over to the side of this sand dune, which allows us to just poke our turret around the edge of it and see if we can get any shots off. There's an IS-3 over there, but we have no shot on him. And ooh, there's a T-44, tier 8 medium tank. And oh, that looks like the front of him, probably not going to go through, but you know, we're going to have some shots anyway. And yeah, it looked like he was just playing peekaboo over that dune. Someone nails that IS-2, nails the T-50, poor guy. And this time he's decided that he needs to be side on to us. So okay, we're just going to make him regret that. And you can see this gun has a good reload. The accuracy is okay, if not fantastic. The alpha damage, well, it's not great, but you know, the rate of fire makes up for it. And penetration's not bad. It's good enough, certainly, to go through the sides of tier 8 tanks without too much trouble. Can we get another shot on him? Oh, he's fronts to us again, but his front plate is now the angle has been flattened out by the angle that he was going up that slope. So we managed to get a shot through it. I think we're going to have another one, but he's basically disappeared. But you can see that we managed to get a good amount of damage in on that tier 8 medium. We now see this Tiger 2, but shooting at the front of a Tiger 2, I'm try and snipe the commander's hatch, but from this range, well, apparently I did it. Ooh, and he's just turned his tank, so we're just going to lay into him. Because flanking shots for the win. And this is what this tank excels at. Just the target lights up and just pummeling them. And there we go. Just killed a tier 8 heavy. And we're just playing the support tank. And working these guys over at longer ranges. The one thing that does become noticeable is if you're in a tier 8 game, you burn through quite a lot of ammo trying to put damage on, you know, top tiers. Not all of your shots are going to penetrate, and even when they do, your alpha damage is so anemic, you really do have to burn through the shots. But the DPM on this tank is not terrible. So we're currently winning 4-1, which is nice. And there's just under 7 minutes of the game remaining. So this is an assault game, in case it wasn't obvious. And so the pressure really is on us to go over and make them die, in short. We're not doing anything else here, so we move up to a new position. And so this is the typical sort of gameplay for the Cheeto. And if this sort of gameplay bores you, then you might go down the Japanese line, you might not, but if you do, you're probably not going to spend any more time in this tank than you have to. And ooh, T-34. And so we just start opening up on this guy. But he's moved, fine. Side armour, jolly good. Now, that one bounced. Trying to hit his hull, preferably the lower plate of his hull, because his hull is 102 odd millimeters thick, but it's got sloping, and side of the turret, jolly good. It's got sloping, and if he's angled as well, we're going to struggle to go through it. But if he reverses back onto that higher ground, ooh, side shots, like this, Then suddenly he's flattening out the angle to his front plate. And we're just putting shots through the top of his turret there. And if he does that, I'll fire shots at the front of his hull all day. Be great. Try and see if we can get his cupola, but not. Now some of you might say, well, you know, to get through this guy, could you not just switch to gold ammo? The thing is, if the shot goes where I'm aiming it, it has a good chance of penetrating with AP. And gold isn't going to increase that chance significantly, I don't think. If the shot deviates, like up and hits the turret, gold isn't going to work anyway. I mean, you can see that when my shot goes where I'm aiming, then generally speaking, I'm penetrating. It's just the going where you're aiming bit. And he's moving around to make my life difficult, and someone's tracked him. There's some more damage. We end up doing over 1,000 damage to this guy. But have any of you noticed a problem? We're shooting tier 8s, so not every shot is penetrating, and suddenly, well, we started off with like 70 odd shots. Oh, someone else got him. And suddenly, we're down to 25. Was it 60 odd shots? I can't remember. 65 or something like that. So we've burned through a lot of ammunition, and there's only 4 minutes of the game left, and it's at this point I think that I noticed the time constraint working against us. But I don't want to be the first one to rush forward because, firstly, bottom tier. Secondly, not very agile. Thirdly, no armour. So I'll just die. So instead, I move up to another position on this ridge to lay down some more supporting fire. And as I say, if this is not your gameplay, then you're certainly not going to keep this tank, and you're probably not going to think this tank's particularly good. But if you're okay with this, then you can have some fun with it. Nope, someone else kills the T-29, and oh, hello, targets. And he's been tracked, so I'm just going to lay shots into the side of this VK. Burning through yet more ammunition. And he's dead. KV-1S has gotten himself behind a dune. Well, fair enough, whatever. 11-7 up, 3 minutes remaining. So what's left? They've got a Cheeto, a KV-1S, SU-152 and a KV-3, none of their top tiers remaining. And we've got a reasonable spread of tanks from all available tiers. Less than 3 minutes. And it's at this point, I think, I decide to come down from my vantage point, try and get some flanking on, try and get some more damage in. I say running out of ammo. I have 20 shots left, which might sound like a lot, but only 10 of those are AP. And, you know, the rate at which you can burn through them, that's not a huge amount. Cheeto down there, but I don't have an immediate shot. And there's just him and this SU remaining. SU takes some fire. Ouch. SU's dead. I know where the last guy is. And so I tell everyone, he's down here, guys. Come and kill him. And we just lay into him. And we get the kill. And that's the game. So we end up doing just shy of 3,000 damage in a tier 8 game, and a lot of that was to tier 8s. And I was slightly surprised to find out that while we got over 1,300 base XP, this was not an ace tanker game. This was only good enough for first class mastery. I think it's because the Japanese have just come out and people are playing them a lot. But I have also noticed the XP requirements for tier 6 mediums for the mastery badge seems to be higher than for tier 6 heavies as a general rule. Anyway, so that was an example of, you know, despite being bottom tier, of kind of the what I consider the typical gameplay of this machine. The next game is going to be rather different. So here's game 2, and I'm showing this for two main reasons. Firstly, it shows the new map that they introduced in patch 8.10, and secondly, because this is a very different type of game. Very, very different. For starters, we're top tier. And we're going to try and do, you know, what I consider the typical gameplay of this machine. Hanging back, using that gun depression to poke your turret up and just plough shots into people. But it's not going to come down to that, really. So initially we're just going over here. I don't think I have ever driven into the town in this thing. It looks like a death trap to me. There's only, well, there's one road into it. You can ford the water at each end of it as well. But there just appear to be killing grounds each of the entrances/exits. So, I don't know. It just doesn't look like it's a good place to go to me. And I'm just pointing out, we have a fail platoon. Yay, everyone loves a fail platoon. So Tier 4's gotten himself into this game, and for some reason he's platooned with Tier 2 artillery. So this is a game that T-57 would never normally get into. Never mind, them's the breaks, I suppose. And this is going to be one of those games. You know, the game is a bit... I don't know if it's the team wasn't all that good, or they just went through us quickly, and as I say, it's going to be a very, very different sort of game. We've lost our first tank already, the flak bus, nailed by their artillery. That FV looks like a fun little artillery piece. I'm currently at Tier 4 on the British artillery. I'm going to eventually get around to giving it a go. And at the moment, there's just me on this corner. There's a couple of heavies behind me, and there's an M8A1 over there. Now, for the early part of this game, I'm going to be honest, I don't think I achieve a great deal of damage. So I try and poke out. Oh, this guy's firing a howitzer. Really long shell travel time. Which means this guy is silly. I should have pulled back earlier than that. Why is he silly? What are you talking about? Simple. If he had upgraded every single module on the Churchill 1, he would have the top gun on the Churchill 1. And that would firstly make the Churchill 1 a good tank to play. And secondly, it's a good, decent gun. Well, rephrase. It's a very similar gun to the Churchill's top gun anyway. So I think this guy's a plonker for not having done that. But, you know, he didn't. Our Churchill, meanwhile, has the top turret. It appears to have the top gun, or at least one of the 75mm guns, but that doesn't stop him just going out and poking his side armour around. And, oh, good lord, this T-34 is getting on my nerves. It really is. Just spamming away. So I report him. Now, I haven't actually done a single point of damage yet. Churchill 7s are tough from a distance. They have weak points on the front of the tracks, but if you can't really hit that, and from that distance I couldn't reliably hit that, then that's difficult. And this VK is looking at RM6, but someone's going to have to deal with him. I might take a shot to the face to do it, and I did, but I killed him. Right, first bit of damage done. Huzzah! We're 4-3 up, and that doesn't seem terrible. But we've got a load of TDs camping at our base, which is frustrating, and I think that's what the T-34 was pointing out, although he was doing it in a very annoying way. And we got all these heavy tanks just faffing and milling around here, and just getting on my nerves, frankly. And, oh, they have come through the city and the lower path here. So a Hellcat wastes a shot on the T-57. Oh, to be fair, the Hellcat's armour is so bad that a T-57 could actually damage him. And I think, sod this for a game of soldiers. People are obviously trying to come and assault our base. I do not trust the people currently there to defend it, despite the fact that all those tank destroyers have done all game is sit there to defend it. I just don't trust them. And suddenly we're 5-7, 5-8 down. Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. This is looking rather dicey. Churchill pulls one back with 2 tanks down. Oh no, their artillery nails our KV-1S. 3 tanks down. Or one of their artillery. So I'm just going to come around here and have a look-see to see what I can see. there's that Churchill from earlier on. I'm slightly wary about going over to try and tackle him, however, because I don't want to get shot from the town, and oh dear, that TD is taking damage. It's a Hetzer, so, you know, it's not a make or break tank in this game, but it'd be really nice if he stayed alive. And oh, hello Churchill, how are you today? Someone else nails him, a Hellcat. Oh, I spot out, ouch! I think that's an 88. They're also tough from a distance, and ouch! Oh, good lord. I take a bounce there. A bounce? What on earth could have bounced on me? Well, I point out that I think there's a type down there because he nailed one of our TDs, I think it was. So I think there's a type just at the edge of the town in about B6. T3485 says, our team are a bunch of noobs. So I say, you're a spammer. Deal. God, he's just got on my nerves. He died earlier on. He didn't really achieve anything. I don't even know what he's saying. I wasn't really a camper. I've been over half this map. Now, the 88, it's tough from the front, so I came over here so that I didn't have to deal with it from the front. I could deal with it from the side instead. One shot. He seems distracted by someone. 2 shots. I've no idea who he's distracted by. He should be able to see what direction he's being shot from. Oh well, he's dead. And, artillery. Their German artillery piece nails our Hetzer. With 3 tanks down, there's only 3 of us remaining. One of them's a Hellcat, one of them's artillery, and one of them's me, and I'm not on a lot of health. I'm a 1 shot for the artillery, the flak bus. I'm a 2 shot for the T49 and the Type 58. But our artillery, M41, nails their artillery. Keep an eye on this M41. He's no slouch. Ooh, it looks like our Hellcat's taking a pasting. There's that Type 58. He's only on 3%. There's also a Chi-He. It's probably him that bounced on me earlier on. Penetration on the Chi-He's gun isn't great, and whilst this thing has no armour, it's just enough to make shots from a Chi-He not guaranteed pens, I suppose. I'm trying to be cautious here, and oh god, there's a flak bus. And just take your time, he hasn't seen you, and kill him. So I'm on 3 kills. Whew. I'm just spotting this guy out. Oh, he looks like he's the other side of that building. Hellcat's dead, so it's just the 2 of us left. And you can see this is really not the same sort of game. I'm trying to destroy some of this guy's cover. This is a much more clutch game, and our artillery just wipes him out. 2 plays 3. Okay. Well, one of our 2 is artillery, and one of them's me, and I'm not on much health, so this is not a foregone conclusion by any stretch of the imagination, but it's suddenly looking a lot more doable. And our Churchill says, good job to the artillery. I'm here too. Never mind. I agree. The artillery's doing well. Although this Churchill player seems very enamoured by him, but, you know, whatever. So I'm just sitting over here for a while, because I know there's a type over in that general direction. But we're outnumbered, and I don't want them all to come on and just gank us, so I decide to go hunting. Now, I am expecting to run into the T49, because I know the type is in the town, and their artillery will be at base, so I'm expecting to run into the T49. The T49 has rubbish armour, so I load high explosive. The thing to bear in mind is the high explosive from this gun isn't great, but, you know, I reckon it'll be useful against the T49. So that's what I do. Really not very fast, which is kind of frustrating. And that Type 58 is on 4 kills, so we can't take him lightly. He's a dangerous opponent. And oh god, there's their artillery. What's the artillery doing here? Okay. Shot 1, misses. Shot 2, tracks him and does 33 damage. So I switch back to AP. Shot 3, 138, puts him on 15%. Don't really want to give him time to aim at me, and oh, he's still on 15%, and it's one of these, is it worth taking the risk? He's behind a rock now, and if he stays still, he can probably at some point try and pre-aim on this corner, and oh, there was a Type 58 at our base, and oh, the artillery was not having this, so the M41 just blats the Type. Good job, artillery. He's on 4 kills. So I decided to reposition. And there's the artillery. He has got a kind of partial turret, but there we go, and I kill him. Now, when the artillery turned up, I had a thought cross. Maybe their T-49 is AFK. Because why else would their artillery leave the base? Artillery, you know, oh, and then suddenly the Hellcat comes up, their Hellcat, and says, "Oh, report T-49, presumably for being AFK." Yeah. Don't necessarily take the enemy's team's word as gospel. Sometimes they try and trick you. But this lined up with what I already suspected, so I'm kind of wondering if it's true at this point. And I decide either way, let's just go and find out. Can't expect the artillery to do it, although having said that, he is moving up. This was a good artillery player. It was a pleasure to play with him. Supportive and very, very, as I say, enjoyable to play with. He wasn't afraid to get stuck in, and he defended himself admirably. Absolutely brilliant. Between us, it looks like we've hopefully nailed this game. Which means between us we'll have killed 9 of their team. If we were platooned, we'd have just gotten brothers in arms, and oh no, but the turret has turned, so it looks like either he was AFK, or he went AFK, or... And there's that high explosive. That one didn't penetrate, so I switched to armor piercing to guarantee the last shot kills him. Or maybe he disconnected. No, he didn't disconnect. He just went AFK. He was there to start with because the turret had turned, and then he cleared off. Anyway, so that was a very different sort of game, showing a much more seat of the pants, clutch game. It was a lot more, you know, much less static, and more exciting, let's be honest. But not really playing to this tank's strengths, just making it work. Anyway, so in summary, what is this tank like? Well, as I've already said, it's a second line support tank. You want to use that gun depression to just poke your head up over hills and shoot at people, and if you can, use that DPM to just pummel them into the ground. And if you do that, then you can do quite well in this tank. What I didn't show you is kind of a typical game. Well, I showed you the tier 8 game because I thought the gameplay was typical, and I wanted to show you what it can do in a tier 8 game. What I didn't show you was a typical top tier game. This was not a typical game, and what you know, this is the sort of tank that can rack up Confederate medals without too much difficulty. It's that sort of machine. And if you like that, you'll probably enjoy this, and if you don't, you probably won't. Anyway, I hope you found it informative. I hope you enjoyed some of the replays. If you did, feel free to catch some of my other videos, or subscribe, leave me a like, whatever. If you don't want to, fine, it's all good. And I wish you the very best of luck and enjoyment in whatever you do, and happy hunting on the battlefield.